Great to be here in Canberra today. Thank you to the AIIA for the invitation to present and participate in today's summit. My name's Simon Rossi. I'm the General Manager of Uber based in Melbourne. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about, who Uber is, where we've come from and what it is we do. And what it is that we do is really about taking something that's very offline, getting from A to B or transportation, wrapping it in technology, and then making it really, really, really simple. But then I'm going to focus on, once we talk about Uber and what we do, I want to focus on three key areas of the benefit that this technology brings to us. And those benefits are going to be in the realms of extending public transport, creating jobs, and improving the cities we live in. So, what is Uber? Who here has heard of Uber? Okay, most people. Who's actually taken a ride in Uber? About 30-40%. Who's actually an Uber partner driver? Damn, none. Okay, we don't operate in Canberra yet, so that would make sense. So Uber, we are a technology company. We've developed a smartphone app that connects somebody looking to get from A to B with the nearest driver. We don't employ any drivers and we don't own any cars. We've created a marketplace where a rider, someone looking to get from A to B, can connect with a driver and transact. We do that at a number of different price points or options, predominantly here in Australia, and where we started was Uber Black, which is your professional chauffeur-driven service, and then Uber X, which is a low-cost option, which basically allows anybody that's gone through the requisite criminal background checks to use their own vehicle to transport people around the city. In other cities around the world, and in Sydney in particular here, we do have other services, Uber XL, Uber SUV, Uber Lux, Uber Taxi, but predominantly here in Australia and around the world, it is Uber Black and Uber X are the predominant services that we do have. How it works, for those that haven't used Uber and don't know what it is, basically you download an app to your smartphone, you register an account online, you open the app, you push a button to request a ride. Once you push that button and it gets accepted by a driver on the other side who also has a mobile phone and an app, accepts your trip, it then sends you all the information about that driver that you need to know. It sends you the driver's name, his car, his registration plate, his ETA, how far away he is from you, and it'll also show you on a map the road that he's driving along to get towards where you are. He arrives, you jump in, takes you to destination, and we transact online we transact with your credit card and then pay the driver. So it's just a bit of insight in how the app works and what it is. So how did we start and where did we come from? It actually started from a very real but probably a small problem where our co-founders, Garrett and Travis, were in Paris at the Web Conference 2009. They left the conference late, went outside to try and find a car, couldn't find a taxi, couldn't find a bus stop, didn't speak French, and the metro was shut. And so they had a 2.5-hour walk back to their hotel that night, and they thought, how can we solve this problem? And the first idea was, wouldn't it be great to build an app so you push a button and get a ride? I thought that's great. Then the second part of that problem was, why don't we use these beautiful BMWs and Mercedes that we see driving around the streets of Paris every day? Let's buy a bunch of those, take them to San Francisco so people can ride around in luxury. And as they were doing, they were high-fiving each other, patting each other on the back, saying, yes, let's go do this. But on the flight on the way home the next day, I think Travis turned to Garrett and said, why would we go out and buy all these new cars when there's hundreds of thousands of cars in San Francisco that we can utilise? And this is really where Uber and the share economy or collaborative consumption or the peer-to-peer economy sort of intersect. We talk about being in the peer-to-peer economy, and the peer-to-peer economy, which I won't go into much detail, is really about using technology to allow people to connect, to buy, sell and trade. And it really starts to break down the traditional models of seller to buyer. That's another conversation that we could go into for hours. But so Uber has been, some interesting formatting there. Uber has been, quickly grew across Australia. We're now in almost 300 cities around the world, 57 countries, I think, overnight. In Australia and New Zealand, we're now in nine cities across Australia and New Zealand. So what is it that we actually do? We've got a smartphone app, and really we talk about taking something that's very, very offline, wrapping it in technology and making it really simple. And I think the best way to explain that is by telling a very quick story. And I was actually living in San Francisco just before Uber launched 5 years ago, and I'd be out on a Friday night, and I'd be in a restaurant, I had a lovely meal, I've had too many glasses of wine, it's time to go home. So I'd ask the waiter to call me a cab and get the check. And he'd bring the check over and say, I can't call your cab, it's too hard, go do it yourself. So I'd walk outside, you'd try and hail, and 10 cars would go past, you'd walk around the corner thinking you can outsmart other people, get a cab, 10 more would go past, and finally you'd get one. And the cab wouldn't like where you're going, so he'd drive off. And so you decide to go walk to the train station, it starts raining, and you've got 10 minutes to the train station, you still don't know when you're going to get home. And so we fast forward that story to today, and you're in the same restaurant or whatever restaurant around the world where we operate. It's time to go home, you pull out your phone, you push a button. You get the driver's name, his ETA to pick you up, the car model, the registration plate, his contact details. You can even watch him on the map drive to you if you really want to. You pay the bill, the phone alerts you when the driver's out the front, you grab your jacket, you get in the car and you go home. So what we're doing is taking this thing of transportation, moving from A to B. In the first story we saw quite difficult, quite painful, quite unreliable. You get caught in the rain, making it really easy by using technology. Some of the technology that we do use to facilitate this is mobile technology. We put the data in the user's hand wherever they are, whenever they need it. All you do is open your phone, push a button, and you've got transport coming to you. We use GPS technology. In the rider's phone, the person looking for a trip, and the driver's phone, there's GPS. And using those two GPS points, we can bring those two together very easily, get the driver to come to the rider. We also do that in helping get the destination. The rider puts in their destination, the driver doesn't need to guess or figure out which way to go. Cashless, we talk about cashless. Every rider that rides in Uber must register a credit card in advance. So at the end of the journey, you can get out and walk off, and your card will automatically be charged and will send a trip summary to your email, so you've got a record of that. That's just a couple of the areas of different pieces of technology that we use to make this idea of going from A to B really simple. Before I jump into the impacts of this, because the most important thing is really the impact of what we do here. Getting transportation is great and make it really convenient is great, but the economic and social impacts is what's important. But before I jump into that, the most important thing for our business is safety. And there's a lot of different conversations going on about the safety requirements for UberX. So I just want to clear a couple of these up and just talk about the safety requirements that we have. So everywhere in Australia, every single Uber driver must go through a criminal background check with the Australian Federal Police. The database is called the CrimTrack database. Every single driver must pass that to get on the road. Every single driver must also do a traffic background check at their local roads authority, Vic Roads in Victoria, for example. They must pass that before they can get on the road. In terms of insurance, every car has insurance, and Uber has a contingent liability insurance policy on top of that that covers every trip up to $5 million here in Australia. That's every single trip, a contingent liability insurance policy on top of the car's own insurance. I think the most important thing when we talk about safety is taking away the anonymity from transportation. We've done background checks on the drivers, and we ask the riders to register and identify themselves via mobile phone numbers and credit cards. We send a code to their mobile phone that must be punched into the app before they can actually book a trip. What that means is there's no strangers getting in a car ever. Two-way feedback. At the end of every single journey that we do, we ask both the rider and the driver to rate each other out of a 5-star rating. What we do with that information is collect it and look at it on a weekly basis to say, are we spotting trends with a particular driver or rider not delivering the service levels or quality that we expect? And if so, what action can we take? And so by allowing both parties to rate each other, they're actually starting to manage each other and making sure they're delivering a good service or being a good passenger in the car. I spoke about cashless transactions before. Really, that's important for the driver. The driver's not walking around, or driving around, with hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in their pocket at 2 a.m. So just before we jump into the impacts that we're seeing of this technology, I just wanted to touch on some of the safety aspects of Uber. So what it is we do is important, but it's really the impact of this technology and innovation that's the game changer. And I really want to focus on 3 things today that we're seeing having massive impacts across Australia and around the world. And the first one is extending public transport. And we've got 2 maps of Melbourne up here. Each of the maps has identified the train lines in Melbourne. And to the right-hand side, or your left, to the left-hand side, what we've done is identified a number of train stations, regional or suburban train stations, where Uber trips have started and finished at least 3 kilometres away from another train station. What does this mean? This means that Uber is complementing the current public transport infrastructure that we have in our cities. People that are coming into a train station out here, the end of the line, they've got nowhere to go from a public transport perspective. They're booking trips that are taking them that last couple of kilometres or those last couple of miles that they need to follow to get home. On the other side, we've got the same map basically, but we're looking at the major train stations of Melbourne. And what we're looking at here is people that are coming into those train stations and booking Uber to get to their end of their destination. Again, the same principle that people are using public transport to get to a point and then using Uber to take them to the location where public transport is not covering those areas. Still in Melbourne, and we've got on the right-hand side here, what we've done is done a consensus track along the train line. So where you see the teal or the blue colours, that's a 500 metre, it basically means that in that the blue area, you're within 500 metres of a train station in Melbourne. And you see there's a lot of grey there, it looks a bit like fishboney. So anything that's grey, that means there's no public transport, trains that can get you where you need to go. If we look at the same map on the right-hand side, this is locations of, this is the location of drop-off points for Uber trips in the last 6 months. What we'll see here is that Uber trips are covering not only the train lines, but everywhere in between. So we're really starting to extend the coverage of public transport or transport for where trains and buses don't go. And I think what's really even more important here is that we can do it in a timely manner. So if we look at the top line here, this is the estimated pickup time for an Uber in each of the cities listed there. Melbourne and Sydney, under 4 minutes. So we go back a slide, we look at this blue area. Most of that blue area, you can get a car in Melbourne in under 4 minutes on average. The rest of Australia was still about 4.5 minutes at a maximum. If you're anywhere you are within the metro, and depending on how old we are and how long we've been in that city, but you can pretty much guarantee an average time, pickup time of those around your city. I think we mentioned about 20,000 jobs before. Across Australia, so I'll take a step back. Uber allows drivers, partner drivers, to work when they want, where they want, however long they want, and how they want to. As I said before, we don't employ drivers, we merely give them technology that allows them to connect with somebody looking for a ride. And so Uber partner drivers can work a couple of hours during the week if they want. They can work all weekend, because that's when the most money can be made. That's when most people are moving around. It's their choice. They're basically creating their own small business, that they make the decisions about when they work, where they work, and how they work. In Australia, we've had tens of thousands of people apply to be UberX drivers. Today, there's thousands of people on the road that are driving UberX. And the interesting part is what makes up this group of UberX drivers. And I'm going to talk about unemployment in a moment, but that's one subsection. The second subsection, which is by far the largest subsection of Uber partner drivers, are people doing it for a second job. People that work either part-time, they're a courier, they work in a factory. We've got lawyers, we've got students, we've got professionals that work sometimes just 10 hours a week to make a little bit extra money to pay for their mortgage. We've got some people that do it because they're part-time, they need to make some extra money. Traditionally, the people that are doing this across Australia, on average, 18 hours a week, and it's usually to support a primary income. But the great thing is that they choose their hours, they choose when they work, and they choose how much money they make based on when they work. Saturdays, Fridays is always the busiest. You can always make more money during those times. So that's one sort of population, people just doing this to earn a little bit of income. The second population is a lot of artists, musicians, sports people, and entrepreneurs that use the platform to supplement an income while they follow their dreams or build a business. So we all know the hardest thing to do when starting a business is the first 2 years of not making any money. We've got a lot of entrepreneurs now that are using this to drive 20, 30, 40 hours a week, whatever they choose, to give them enough income to support themselves while they build this business. The same goes with musicians, artists, and sports people. We've made a commitment to governments. If we can partner with governments to formalise ride sharing, and this is what UberX does, formalise ride sharing across Australia and in the States, we will deliver 20,000 jobs to Australians in 12 months. And that's by working with governments to bring in safety-based regulations and not creating a barrier of entry for people who want to just work 5, 10 hours a day, a week, whatever, to earn a little bit of extra money. So our commitment to the Australian government is we want to work together. We've got the great technology, we've got the enabler for people to work when they want in a flexible environment. We want to work with governments to enable more people to do that. So we talked about the underemployed and the unemployed, and so this is a map of Sydney. On the right-hand side, your left-hand side, the really dark shaded areas you can see, that's where the highest unemployment is in Sydney a couple months ago. And if you look on the same map, where the teal coloured or the blue colour, we've highlighted similar areas. This is the most concentrated area for Uber X partner drivers where they live and come from. So you can see, although it's not 100%, you can see a real correlation between unemployment in New South Wales or Sydney and where our Uber partner drivers are coming from. You know, there is a constituent of people that have unfortunately lost employment, be it from a downturn in the economy or whatever reasons, that are unemployed, and they're using Uber to support themselves while they go out and find full-time work. So, coming to the last point of impact and benefit. Imagine fewer cars, and I think this is really about creating and improving our cities that we live in. And how can you improve the cities we live in? It's potentially one way of doing it is reducing cars. And how do you reduce cars? And we've got a product that we've been building, very, very heavy algorithms, very, very heavy use of crunching data, but it's called Uber Pool. And Uber Pool fundamentally allows two separate concurrent trips in the one car at the one time. And what that means is that me as a rider will pay 60% of the journey. As we go on that journey, we pick up a second rider who also pays about 60% of their journey. I get to my destination, they get to their destination, and the driver gets about 120% of what the fare would have been. So I can't remember if I not own a vehicle, people start to sell their cars. And you get this scenario where if people are selling their cars because it's cheaper, it's more convenient to use an on-demand service, probably faster, you take cars off the road. And if you take cars off the road, you get to an area of less congestion. You get less CO2 emissions coming from the cars, because what we're doing is taking cars off the road and we're better utilising the ones on the road. So as we start to take cars off the road, we don't only get the social benefits, but we get a whole bunch of economic benefits. So if we start to think about taking cars off the road, and I'll use Victoria as an example, I think the Victorian government made a $18 billion commitment to infrastructure in the last election. I think it was last November. And $8 billion of that was going to a tunnel, a road. And if we can take cars off the road, which is actually the root cause of why we need to build a tunnel, we need to make more space for more cars, why don't we actually solve that problem by taking cars off the road? We take cars off the road by providing cheap transport, shared transport, where we're better utilising our assets that are already existing. So, time for change. Technology and innovation will continue to challenge the status quo. Technology and innovation will continue to provide benefits, productivity gains, economic benefits, social change. Governments around Australia should be looking at how do we adopt this technology, how do we embrace these opportunities and make the most of them, and take action if there's regulations or frameworks that are standing in the way of progress. And I'm going to leave you with one thought. The British Locomotive Act of 1865. The British Locomotive Act of 1865 basically said that as self-propelled vehicles were getting onto the roads, the railways submitted a bill that got passed, sponsored a bill through Parliament that got passed that suggested that any self-propelled vehicle needed to have a maximum speed of 2 miles an hour in a city, and it had to have 3 staff members, a driver, a stoker, and a flag waver. Imagine a world today where that law was never changed. And that law was kept in place to maintain the interests of existing incumbents. Imagine the inefficiency, the poor use of assets that we'd be looking at. And so really, for us, it's a call to action to governments to look at the opportunities that technology can bring. We look at the technology we've done with respect to safety of moving people around, the convenience, the safety of moving people around. So really our call is for governments to act now, embrace change. I think the last question I'll really leave you with is, what is the cost of inaction? What is the cost for governments to not adopt these new technologies, these new business models that are coming, and sit there on the sidelines and wait for change to happen, or continue to operate in the same frameworks and existing frameworks that we've been in for years? A lot of the regulations that we talk about and we look at were written more than 20, 30 years ago. I know within the Transport Act, some of them were written 50 years ago. Times have changed. Mobile technology, infrastructure that we use is changing the way we do things. It's making us much more productive, much more efficient, and it's really time for governments to embrace the technology and embrace the technology and start to get the benefits that technological innovation can deliver. Thank you. I think I've got a couple of minutes if we wanted to do any questions.
Thanks, Simon. We will do a couple of questions, but just before we do, when you think about someone who is in such a powerful way changing an old industry and making it new, the key things there: making it simple, improving our cities, leveraging the peer-to-peer economy, driving two-way feedback between the customer and the consumer and the provider, and changing employment, or importantly, changing unemployment. I think they're all incredibly powerful things, and it's great to see so much change so quickly from a business. So we've got time for two questions. So who would like to ask Simon a question? Yeah. Do we have a microphone? Elizabeth? No, we don't. You're just going to have to shout it out.
Just a question on those stats and maps up there. How many of the drivers in the Sydney area are Uber Black and Uber Rex?
I don't know exactly off the top of my head. I would say today would be probably 70-30. 70% Uber X, if not more. 70 to 80% Uber X, 20-30% Uber Black. Yeah.
One more? Yes.
Uber, in a sense, in terms of the Internet of Things, is a way station to the next point, isn't it? Because we're going to have autonomous vehicles. The driver's going to be taken out of the equation at some point in the next 20, 50 years, certainly in 50 years. So that's going to be the interesting thing. And I think that's one of the things that I think is missing from our discussion so far today, is the implications of that. You can talk about employment now, but employment down the track will be an entirely different matter.
Yeah, and I think, today it's not a reality just yet. This is the market that we're in, and this is the market we're playing in. Absolutely. There's a lot of work, a lot of investment going into self-driving cars. There's a lot of investment going into all sorts of automation. We've seen it in supermarkets with self-checkout. We've seen it with ATMs in the banks, and that's to the point of technology is going to continue to change and evolve, and we just have to deal with these different changes, but we've got to embrace them, because the benefits and the productivity gains and the social benefits and economic benefits that we get from it far outweigh the idea of standing still and worrying about what's going to change in the future.
Yep, one more. Sorry.
I'm just interested in your thoughts about whether your business model would work if privacy reins on privacy levels too tight.
So the question was, would the Uber business model work if the privacy reins were pulled too tightly? Yeah, I think the privacy reins are pretty tight at the moment across the world, and they're probably getting tighter, and our business model is continuing to evolve. I think the great part is the benefits that the data and the traceability and accountability that our data provides when a trip starts to a trip ends. You think about if you've ever left something in a cab, you never get it back. There's nowhere to go. That's a really great thing. And so as long as we're using the mechanisms, and that's for support and accountability, then I think it's a good thing. And if the reins get tight, and we'll figure out with our business model what needs to change. But at the moment, we work within the realms, and we'll continue to do so.
All right. Simon. I'm sure there are a lot of other questions, but without putting you on the spot, because I didn't ask you before, but given it's another innovative technology, if you aren't tweeting questions to Simon, I think he might be happy to take any other responses. So the hashtag AIIA Summit, and I'm sure Simon will answer any other questions for the rest of the public community to share. So ladies and gentlemen, please thank Simon Rossi.